Okay, so first things first, 1½ cups flour. Now I usually like to round off my cups because you can always use a little more. So then you scoop it out, 1½ cups of flour. Okay. And then I like to have metal measuring cups because they're easier to scoop the vegetable shortening with. I just use whatever brand I happen to have. Could be Crisco, could be the Stater Brothers brand, but it calls for ½ cup. So I'm going to grab that. Alright. And you see, I get the big tubs because I use these things a lot. I even have a second big tub for the other 4 containers of pumpkin mush still in my freezer. Alright, hence ½ cup of shortening. And then it also calls for a 1/3 cup of water. Make sure it's cold because you don't want it to be melting everything right away. Here's your 1/3 cup of water. Alright, it also calls for ½ teaspoon of salt, which is optional. Don't get me wrong, it is definitely optional. But I like to put it in so that it balances out everything else I put in. Alright. I also use sugar. Gotta put in a handful of sugar in order to make this work. Otherwise your crust is not really going to be great. It doesn't go well with the pumpkin pie. So just opening up a new bag of sugar. And you can get just like a small handful. It doesn't have to be big, just some you can put your fist over. Just kind of toss that in. And then sprinkling of cinnamon. I like the McCormick brand of stuff because you can find everything there, but pretty much any cinnamon will do. We want to put in a dash of cinnamon. Actually, it's more like an enthusiastic sprinkling. And then cloves. You also want to put the cloves in there because the cloves help the crust to blend in with the pumpkin pie. So you put some clove in there. And most professional pie people will tell you to use an instrument for actually cutting the crust. You can. I find it's not as easy to use as, say, just a regular old fork. So I'm going to go ahead and use my trusty old fork. And this is where the hard work comes in. Got to make sure to cut the vegetable shortening all the way in to every bit of the flour spice mixture. Normally I'd also be making a whole bunch of these at once, not just one shot. So I would put together all of my dry ingredients first, the flour, the cinnamon and sugar, salt, mix all that together first. But since we're just doing this one shot, sometimes you just gotta throw it all together. One thing I like about this type of pie is that if you freeze the pumpkin mush, you can have pumpkin pie, pumpkin cookies, pumpkin muffins all year. Alright, and so what I've got here is kind of crumbly. And this is good. You've got some big old chunks of vegetable shortening in there. This is the point where you can kind of just mush everything together like you would a big old lump of dough for bread. And boy, I'll tell you, you can build some muscle doing this. You do it long enough. And when I make these things in great quantity, when I'm making 3 batches at a time, maybe more, I'll actually sit down and just make crust dough and put it into the pie pans while I'm watching TV. We'll set up a whole station with the TV trays and just go at it. Alright, so here we've got a nice lump of dough, and usually I'll split it in half best you can. Split it in half, and each half will generally go into one large pan, and half of one of these halves will go into a smaller pan. And for each of these there will be excess, but the excess will go into the next batch. So, moving on.